It's afternoon. Good afternoon, Gramps.
Hi, Tilly.
How's it going?
Well, this is nice.
It is. It's another week of the podcast.
Wow. And I'm still alive.
Grandpa, you always go back to this.
Well, most of... I'm getting older.
You are getting older, but that doesn't mean that every week... I mean, I guess you can be proud you're alive every week. That's kind of a big accomplishment.
It's been a great week.
Yeah, you're getting up there.
I am.
Statistically, you're becoming one of the oldest people on the earth.
It's exciting.
When you think about every week, there are other people who aren't surviving.
I'm going for 125.
You're going for 125. I think that would be a record.
Yeah, well, let's do it.
Oh, Gramps, we'll get there. We'll get there.
Yeah.
Similar to last week, we have another cool guest joining us today, which is very exciting for those of you watching or listening. So today with us, we have an actor that's been in over 30 professional theater shows, as well as a handful of TV and movie roles. He is a teacher and director currently working at Santa Cruz Shakespeare. Please welcome Charles Pasternak.
Hi, thank you, Tilly.
Hello. For those of you, we have some pretty cool guests on today, and today we're excited to talk to you. And it is a family affair. So
Yes. Charlie is my brother's oldest son. And of course, I've known him since he was a baby. And when we were thinking of doing the podcast, we began to talk about the people that we would love to have on the podcast. Charlie jumped enormously up to the front of the class. And he did largely because I love to talk with people who have become successful. And he is a success in every inch of that word. And his story is one that I think should be shared because I remember my brother and his mother, Jessica, saying to me, Charlie is going to graduate soon and from high school, and we're excited about him and what he wants to do. And the next thing I heard was that Charlie wanted to be a Shakespearean actor. Now, that's my perception of the world, Charlie. What was going on that motivated you at such an early age to think Shakespeare?
Well, I found Shakespeare in 5th or 6th grade when there was a visiting teacher that did a little thing on Midsummer, and I loved it. And my parents put me in the theater in Topanga Canyon, where we lived, the Will Gear Theatricum, for their summer camp and training. And I just kept at it. I eventually was taking classes there almost year-round, as often as there were. All my first paychecks were from there, jobs, mucking out bathrooms and working box office and things like that. And I worked on their main stage in small roles. And so I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the language, with the poetry, with the rhythm, with the lifestyle of repertory theater and older actors as mentors and passing on their wisdom. And, so I fell in love with it, and I stayed at it all the way through high school. And when I finished high school, I was relatively directionless in one sense. I wasn't gonna go to school, and I moved out of the house right away and got a job at Starbucks. And I didn't know how to do what I was going to do, but I started, you start plugging away and looking and taking classes and figuring it out. So, it's nice to say Shakespearean actor. That is indeed what I eventually made a career out of, but and it is indeed and was then my chief passion. But I couldn't have told you that's what I was going to do. I just wanted to work as an actor, and over a few years discovered that I really wanted to make that living on stage, even though it pays much worse um, than film and TV. It's what made me happy, so it's what I pursued. Um, so, I mean, in a nutshell, that's how I found Shakespeare and eventually crawled towards a career acting and then later directing and teaching that kind of work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, in looking at your website and your resumes and stuff, I think it definitely, in a way, both physically and metaphorically, like screams Shakespeare is what you're into and what you do well. I grew up in theater. I had cousins in theater who really like inspired me. And every time I saw one of their musicals or plays, I was like, this is the best thing ever. This is the best thing anyone could ever want to do. And then when I started as a child doing theater and showing up to things, and you start to get older and you're like, the people who do this are not the richest people in the world usually. And it definitely was an interesting anomaly, because I think so many people at some point try some aspect of acting or performing in a way. And a lot of us lose that, or really kind of it turns into like a hobby as you get older, because it can be hard to really push yourself and completely go for it. So it's really cool to see that you've done that. But I wanted to ask, do you have any memories of doing non-Shakespeare typed theater and you're like, yeah, I tried that and it didn't go well, or you're like, I did it once and I never need to do it again?
No, that's a fun question. No, I've done a lot of non-Shakespeare and I love doing it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, I don't enjoy it as much
Yeah.
as Shakespeare. I mean, look, Los Angeles, where I grew up and where I lived for many years, and this is also true in New York and major cities. When you put a lot of artists together, hopefully they're gonna get together and make great work, but they're very often gonna get together and make terrible work
Yeah.
too. I mean, it's part of the process of the struggle and the striving, which is honorable. So I have been in some turkeys. I have been in some bad shows, Shakespeare and non-Shakespeare, that I hopefully learned from. But no, there's not. It's not that I tested out non-Shakespeare and didn't like it. I prefer Shakespeare because it's my favorite. But I've had wonderful experiences doing other work.
Yeah.
I just, if given my druthers, I will usually land on doing a Shakespeare play.
What? Tell us a bit about. Is it the Porters of Hell's Gate? I remember going to see you when you were just beginning with that production company. And could you talk a bit about the struggles you experienced starting out?
Yeah. I came back from New York, where I had been for a little while, in, I think, 2000. Well, it must have been 2006. And for years I had been working essentially for free, making my living waiting tables or working at coffee shops, and then doing theater for free or close to nothing. And when I got back from New York after a while, I talked to two friends and we were like, well, if we're going to do theater for free, why don't we make it ourselves? So we put up a show. We put in $700 each, which was a lot for us at the time, and a girlfriend's mom donated $1,000 to us, which was very generous because there was no tax write-off. We weren't a nonprofit or anything. She just gave us a check, and we put up a show, and it went well. And so we put up a second show, and that went well. And so we put up a third show. I mean, this was 2007, 8, I think. And then the Porters started, and I ran it for 15 plus years. I ran it when it was all I had, and I was working 30, 40 hours a week waiting tables or catering, and then working 30, 40 hours a week doing that. I ran it when my career started doing better as a national actor, and I was working at theaters across the country. I would run it from afar. I had a wonderful team of support, and it's still going. When I got the job here in Santa Cruz, I passed it off to a new artistic director, a young man named Will Block, and when they finish Shakespeare's canon of 38 plays, will be the first company in LA to have done so. I'm very proud of it. But I mean, as for the struggles, there was never any money. I mean, we got more money eventually. I mean, it has more money now than it ever did before. But, it's very, very hard. We live in a country of private philanthropy, not subsidy. And so, sometimes there are city grants, there are state grants, there are small things, but really to run a company of any size, you need major donors. And so eventually we gathered a few, and we have a strong support base now. And but we're one theater company among hundreds in Los Angeles. So the struggles were money, and really the larger struggles were burnout. People are volunteering or practically volunteering their time for some brutal hours sometimes, especially when you hit tech on a show. And it's all worth it and everybody loves it. But I mean, the challenge is like, how much energy do you have? How much time? People sacrifice. I don't know that anybody quite recognizes how much artists sacrifice to do what they do. And so the greatest struggle is probably the sacrifice. But it's worth it, and we did it, and it's still going strong.
You've played so many theaters across the country. Do you have a favorite?
Well, it would be be hard for me not to say Santa Cruz now,
Yes.
because I run it. But I will say, I mean, Shakespeare Santa Cruz, which took place at the Audrey Stanley Glen on the UCSC campus, was a formative experience for me. I did 4 summers here between 2008 and 13, and it was the launch of my regional career in a lot of ways. People I worked with here took me elsewhere. And it was a truly magical theater. The Grove, where Santa Cruz Shakespeare now operates, is magical in a similar way. And so, it's my home. It's where my roots are. It's my company. It's my theater. So in that way, it's my favorite. I mean, I could give you a list of favorite theaters for various reasons across this country. I love, the Shakespeare Festival of St. Louis is the largest free Shakespeare festival in the country. I think that's pretty miraculous. We'd have nights playing to 3,000 plus people who just came and went at the park. Alabama Shakespeare Festival has the most beautiful indoor stage I've worked on. The list goes on. But I mean, Santa Cruz Shakespeare is my favorite theater, though I'm biased.
Yeah, that's okay though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You got another question, or I got a funny one?
Well, you go ahead and ask the question. My head's filled with things like his mama making popcorn for the audience.
Oh, that's cool.
Or his mom making the costumes for the theater, for the plays. So I find myself taking a walk through the history as I'm looking at Charlie and thinking, I've already said it, an amazing success to begin as a young kid and to follow his dream and to do what he does every day. We think about, just go up to any university that's graduating thousands of people every year, and they always have a speaker saying, follow your dreams and follow what's important to you. And it's kind of reminds me of, in a way, of you, Tilly, who you graduate from Milwaukee School of Engineering and could easily get a job working anywhere. And here you are doing a podcast with your grandfather and following your dream.
I did.
Yeah. And so here's
I kind of laughed thinking about it the other day because I told this story in our first episode a little bit. I wanted to go to school for commercial photography. Like, I spent 7 years in robotics all through middle school and high school. And then I always dually was doing something in music or performing. I was in marching band in high school, competing nationally. And I really loved art and photography and design. And I told my dad I was going to go to school for photography. And he was like, can we try again? Like, can you pick something else? Not that he didn't love photography, but he was like, you're great at engineering. You're fantastic. You love it. You're good at it. Like, not that you have to be an engineer, but like maybe see what other options there are. And so now I went and did the whole 4-year degree, and I'm back to being an artist of sorts.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an interesting conundrum, right? I mean, I understand parents wanting their kids to make a living, but we have a lot of outmoded ideas, right? Like the idea to make a living is to go to school, but most people that go to school are going to leave with the kind of debt that they can never pay down.
Yeah.
And the kind of, it's a broken system. I understand parents being worried about kids making a living, but if your calling is to be an artist, you should be an artist. And if that means struggle, then so be it.
Correct.
Hopefully it doesn't mean struggle along the lines of starvation. But we're relatively privileged people in that way. We're not going to starve. There are people that love us and will make sure of that. But I tip my hat to you. I don't really know you, but I think that's a beautiful thing. I'm glad you're pursuing it.
I think
is creating this podcast the dream? What is the artistic?
Yeah, this is the current dream. I spent my whole senior year of college, all my friends were like signing their contracts with companies and getting jobs. And I just full force. I was like, no, I'm starting a podcast with my grandpa. I'm going to try 110%. And this is my full life focus at the moment and hope that it works out. And I told people, cause especially finishing college, everyone's like, are you crazy? Like, why would you not go get a real job, quote unquote? Right. And I said, worst comes to worst, I'm never going to regret hanging out with my grandpa. Like, at least it's something I can feel good that I always did.
Yeah. And what does a real job mean?
Correct.
It's like, what do you need?
Yeah. Like signing for a 6-figure salary or a continuous, reliable paycheck. Like, that's great for your wallet and your sense of financial security, but it only does so much for like fulfilling the soul. There are too many people who are working 9-to-5s and are completely creatively deprived because they don't put their energy into things that fulfill them creatively.
Yep.
It's crazy.
Okay. Let me ask a foolish question. The play which you had the most fun with?
I mean, that's not a foolish question. I had the most fun playing. It might be a tie. I could name a few. I loved doing Hotspur and Henry IV, which I did at the Shakespeare Festival of St. Louis. And I'm talking about fun. There were better. It was a very good production, actually. But I have felt like I was better in certain roles. I have felt more accomplished in certain roles. But that was probably the most fun in terms of, playing Trotter in the Mousetrap at Indiana Repertory Theater was a ridiculous amount of fun. The audience being shocked at the end of every performance, the reactions. Playing Black Stash, which is a sort of early Captain Hook in Peter and the Starcatcher at the Clarence Brown Theater in Knoxville, Tennessee, was a massive amount of fun. So those were all a ton of fun. I've been in, I guess better shows. Again, all three of those were good. I'm not putting them down. Maybe I've been in better shows. I've played sort of larger roles, but I don't know that I've had more fun than I did with those. The only exception I'd say is that working with the Porters in Los Angeles, eventually I was working with a family. I was working with my best friends in the world. And so there's a certain element of fun of just knowing that you're going to do the show and go to the bar afterwards and spend a few hours with your favorite people
Yeah.
3 or 4 nights a week in this sort of magnified, contained space of a production. I will say that's part of the artistry of theater is the bonding, the sort of intense and fast bonding that happens among a cast and hopefully a crew and everyone over a really abbreviated period of time. You have to go whole hog into it, and doesn't mean there aren't negative experiences. There are, but often you find that a group bonds faster than they would in almost any other circumstance, and sometimes life friendships and sometimes life relationships are formed out of them. So
Yeah.
anyway, it's a long answer. I love what I do.
No, it's
I love
cool.
that aspect of it.
Do you find now that you're 40 years old that the roles are changing?
Of course, yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't mind getting older. Thus far, I've enjoyed getting older. Now, I'm also privileged. The roles for men are I don't want to say better, but they're more. There are more roles for men than for women, especially in the classical theater. That's changing now. There's more availability of sort of gender fluidity in casting, which I think is a good thing. So it's easier for me to say I don't mind getting older. So there's an element of privilege around saying that, but personally at this point in my career, no, I don't mind getting older. The roles do change, um, but especially in Shakespeare for a 40-year-old, there's a very long list of some of the best roles ever written. So I'm okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I was gonna say back to the idea of bonding with the people who you're in that cast with. I think it's kind of funny because one of the world's or top fears of humans is public speaking. And in a way, when you're on a stage by yourself speaking, you're up there by yourself. At least Grandpa and I get to sit behind the cameras and I can edit anything out that we mess up or that we don't feel it should be known to the public. But when you're out there on a stage, granted, at least you're going on a script. You're not kind of freeing it and saying whatever you feel. But I think I remember, I still remember the bond that I had with people I was in shows with, and it really is something special. I think something kind of funny in that going on the idea of being a male in theater, as I was looking through your headshots and different shows you'd been in, it was really kind of funny to see how you cut your hair differently for different roles. And so I wanted to ask, is there a specific role that you either liked or didn't like because you had to shave your beard a certain way or cut your hair or grow it longer? Or one that was more memorable?
No. That's a charming question. Yeah. I was 17. I played Jason's slave in Medea at the Will Gear, the theater I grew up at. And it was great for me. It was the biggest role I'd gotten to play there. It's one of these Greek sort of servants or messengers that says nothing, I'll play, but then comes in with a big speech at one point. And my hair was, almost down to my shoulders for it. And my high school yearbook photo was taken with that hair. And if you can ever find it, you'll see it. It's a disaster. It's blurry. It doesn't look good. I looked terrible. I started putting it up under a hat. It was just a mess. It was a total mess. Mm-hmm. I think it's the first time, my mom cut my hair most of my teenage life. Up to that point, I don't know if it was the first time, but after that show, I remember going to a Supercuts and having them chop it all off. That might have been the first time I went and paid for a haircut. When I've done Louis the 13th in 2 productions of Musketeers, in which I grew out my facial hair in a way that nobody today wears it.
Yeah.
So you walk around feeling like a dork. Most facial hair you can justify. It's like somebody wears it this way these days. Yeah. There are some sort of classical facial hairs and I don't want them to glue it on because it's annoying and it's painful and it tears up your skin, and you have to worry about it peeling off during a show if you're sweating too much. I mean, it's just such a headache. So I'd rather it be my facial hair, my own facial hair, but it does mean that, like with that Louis the 13th, there are certain roles you're going to have to walk around with this facial hair for sometimes months. So no, it's a funny question, Tilly. There have been haircuts and facial hair sort of that I have. At a certain point, you just have to embrace
Absolutely.
the strangeness of it.
For those of you watching and listening, usually, I mean, it's easier for guys. Your hair grows a little bit faster, it's shorter, so it's not as drastic usually if you're going to cut it or change it. For girls, I mean, your options are most of the time, like in kind of community theater, you wear your natural hair. If it's necessary, you could wear a wig. And those who are like really like into it and dedicated could cut their hair or dye their hair. But it's usually not as common for girls to constantly be changing their hair for a show. You're more likely to kind of like put on a wig than you are to chop it off or dye it red or whatever it is.
Wigs are very common in the theater, especially the classical theater. It is just, and I have had to wear wigs for shows, and I have found it, annoying.
Yeah.
Although I'm happy to do it for the part, but it's not always very pleasant. But I know so many women who are like, oh, I love wigs.
Yeah.
Because the process of dealing with their hair or somebody helping them deal with their natural hair to change it for every part.
It's a lot.
It's an easy catch-all. You put in your pin curls, you put on your net, you pin in that wig, and you're good to go.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, and it's also like girls' hair is. It would be going through a lot if you were constantly having to upkeep turning it blonde or dyeing it red or maintaining specific types of haircuts. You got to do a lot to do it. So the investment in a wig is so much more worth it.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and almost, you don't have to, at least in the professional theater, you don't have to provide that wig. We have a wig department.
Yeah.
That.
Absolutely.
Anyway,
Yeah. Tell us what you do today, Charlie.
I'm the artistic director of Santa Cruz Shakespeare. It is a professional equity repertory Shakespeare festival in Santa Cruz, California. It's been around for 43 years. We're coming on to the 11th year of it as an independent organization. We separated from the university here about 11 years ago. Uh-huh. Historically, we present 3 shows a summer, 2 Shakespeares, 1 non-Shakespeare in repertory. That means that the company rehearses in rep, so all 3 plays are being rehearsed at the same time. Actors are in 2 of the 3 plays, so they're rehearsing multiple shows at once. And they all open and run together, so that essentially once everything's open, you could see all 3 plays in a weekend. The other element of repertory we're adding the 4th show in the fall, and that means that we'll be rehearsing that once the other shows are open. So that's sort of the other element of repertory, where you are both rehearsing while you perform, because you're getting ready to open the next thing. Mm-hmm. So it's an amazing company, and I got lucky. I mean, I worked very hard, but a lot of people work hard, and I was in the right place at the right time. They needed a new artistic director. Mike Ryan, who had run the place for 10 years, was retiring. They wanted somebody with history at the festival, if possible, which I respect. This festival, unlike most, has a history of hiring actors as artistic directors. They interviewed me along with a great number of other people. And my experience running the Porters for 15 years gave me a leg up professionally and in terms of practical experience. And it was a long interview process. Yeah. It was during COVID, and Mike had given them many years notice, so that there was no rush. Mm-hmm. So we interviewed for 7 or 8 months. I mean, there was a long period. And I respect the care they were taking.
What do you do, Charlie? What does an artistic director do?
Yeah. Yeah, I pick the shows. I
Okay.
hire the company. I budget the production side, which is shows, backstage staff, costumes, scenic, yada yada. I a theater company. Most theater companies are a two-headed executive directorship. So there's the artistic director and the managing director. The managing director manages most things administrative, most things financial. The artistic director manages all things artistic and handles the budgetary side of the artistic programming. And and then half of what I do is raise money. I mean, half of my job is fundraising and donor engagement and development. I mean, I have wonderful people working for me. I have a development director that handles most of the fundraising campaigns. I have a production manager who handles most of the backstage hiring and management. I have an education director who handles most of the educational outreach and programming. But I run those things. I mean, I set in place what we're trying to do, how we're trying to do it,
Yeah.
and I take a lead in the larger artistic decisions, like who directs the shows, who are the actors in the shows. Um, it's a big encompassing job, and then you add the fundraising aspect because you're the sort of face. I'm the face of the company. Um, and that's enjoyable. I like donor development. I like spending time with people who love the arts and who give to the arts. It's a big job.
Yeah.
I mean, I think in most other businesses, I mean, I don't know. I know CEOs and CFOs have to do the rounds a lot too. I don't know. In the origin of the regional theater, it wasn't part of an artistic director's job to raise money. That was mostly managing directors and boards, which that is what their origin is. What they were there for in the first place.
Yeah.
But it has grown to the point where it's also a major part of my job.
Outside of your job in the theater, what do you like to do for fun?
It's a complicated answer. This is my world. My job is my fun.
Uh-huh.
I could list. I like going to museums. I love baseball.
Yeah. The Dodgers.
I'm a big Dodgers fan. But I don't want to give those things up. But if I had to, I'd be fine. My to do this again. It's not. Nobody in the theater gets paid enough to do this. It has to be pretty encompassing. So fun is often going to the theater. Fun is drinking with actors.
Yeah.
Fun are activities connected to what I do. But yeah,
I think
I'm a passionate baseball fan.
I was gonna say being creative it feels so much more fulfilling than kind of just showing up, clocking in, serving tables, whatever it is.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I mean, happiness is cheap. I'd much rather feel fulfilled.
Correct.
I've also been blessed with good brain chemistry. I wake up every day feeling pretty good.
Yeah.
And that's just not true for a lot of people out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's just random genetics.
Yeah.
So I got lucky in that regard. And feeling fulfilled makes me feel like makes me feel good. It's what my world is about.
Yeah. How many minutes does it take for you to fall asleep?
Most nights, not long. 5 or 10 minutes most nights.
That's in our genes. Yeah.
I'm glad
Yes,
you got
maybe.
those
I mean,
genes.
it hasn't always
I share that with you.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, it hasn't always been the case. I go through different sleep phases. I wake up in the night 2 or 3 times. Sometimes, most of the time, I wake up long enough that I have to get up and try to shake it off before going back to sleep. But
what keeps you awake at night? What wakens you?
Usually anxiety,
Yeah.
work anxiety. Uh, there's a lot on my shoulders, and people's jobs depend on
Yeah.
my people's livelihoods depend on me doing my job well.
Yeah.
And so, the
Yeah.
demons of anxiety and self doubt. I mean, they don't torture me. I'm not trying to make this sound awful.
Yeah.
But they keep me up at night.
Yeah. I think most of the scientists I've worked with, when I ask them that question, what keeps you awake at night? 9 out of 10 times it's being concerned about having enough money to keep their staff in the lab, to keep the laboratories going.
Totally.
Yeah. It's interesting that that exists for artists as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Without getting too political about it, uh,
Yeah.
it's a similar problem. Culture and arts, scientific research into things that affect the lives of the citizenry, I believe should be subsidized. I don't think people should be stressing about whether they can keep their lab techs when they're researching curing a disease that people suffer from. It's I get frustrated with that. I believe it. I believe it, and I'm sure it's similar, and I empathize deeply with that anxiety. It's a sad thing.
Yeah.
It's a sad thing.
Yeah.
I think I have another kind of funny question. People who like know Shakespeare, I mean, they know the biggest ones, like Romeo and Juliet. You get Macbeth and Hamlet and a few other ones.
Midsummer Night's Dream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of interesting because I remember like having to read and study like Shakespearean writing. And the fact that you like full time are living in that world, do you ever like find yourself like thinking or like functioning in the concept of like Shakespearean writing and the way that it's so like Old English or like so much more dramatized?
Yeah, yeah, it's a good question. I think all actors can often be dramatic.
I think that's valid. That is valid.
Um, Shakespeare's rhythms are still our speech rhythms. You talk like Shakespeare.
True.
We all do. He not only was a foundational piece of our language, he was our foundational piece of our rhythm. And the iambic pentameter, which was not just Shakespeare, but the dramatic form of the time, the poetry of the time, is the heartbeat. And we often all speak that way. Now, do I do it more than most? Sure, probably.
Yeah.
I read him on a daily basis, and it sticks with me. But we all do, and I hope, and this is something Santa Cruz Shakespeare works hard to do. I hope more students encounter him in the theater and get to hear his work and see his work done, rather than dryly poring over a text in eighth grade when they barely understand it. Uh,
Yeah.
so to experience the rhythm, especially when interpreted by professional actors, that's the drug that'll hook you. I think a lot of kids are turned off by being forced to read him in eighth grade when they don't understand it, and why should they?
Yeah.
Um, so
Absolutely.
anyway, yeah,
I think
yeah.
it's cool. Are there any, I mean, obviously, I would say Romeo and Juliet is probably the biggest that most people know or know of.
It's without a doubt. It's probably the most famous in the modern world, at least in America. Hamlet is the most produced play. Uh,
Ah,
um, Romeo and Juliet is up there. A Midsummer Night's Dream is up there. I mean, they're the three most popular. Julius Caesar is probably close. Um, you know,
I was gonna
few
ask
others.
because like there's so many. I feel like I'm not sure about the other shows, but I feel like more media is written based off of Romeo and Juliet. Like the number of movies where you're like, that is the Romeo and Juliet like storyline. Do you have any? Do you have one that's like your favorite? Like I was talking to Grandpa about West Side Story the other day, and I said like, I think it gets slow in moments, but like there's just something about the Romeo and Juliet story like that. It just is so beautiful. Is there one like where you're like, this movie or like this song that talks about it is one of your favorites or you think is cool?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, like, it's not the greatest spoken film, but the Baz Luhrmann Romeo and Juliet from when I was growing up was a huge deal. It changed Shakespeare on film. It was very exciting. You know, it's a very cool film. It's filled with sort of kind of revolutionary filmic ideas and concepts. So I don't know. As far as Romeo and Juliet goes, I'd probably say that's my favorite.
Yeah.
But of course, that when I really think about it, that one is cut to shreds, and not many of them are very accomplished classical actors. So I mean, you lose a lot of the play. You lose a great deal of what is usually my favorite part, which is the poetry. But it's a beautifully done and very fun film. So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's a
I'd say
cool
that's
one.
probably my favorite.
People, I'm not sure if you have TikTok, but there's a group of people on TikTok, some theater kids, some English favorers that argue over like what the best line in Romeo and Juliet is. And I think stuff like that is kind of funny because it shows up on my For You page. And I'm like, the fact that like in what other worlds are we able to like have viral videos where thousands of people are arguing over something like this? I think it's really kind of cool. It's an interesting new space for the exposure to something like that.
That's sweet. No, I'm not on TikTok. I'm getting too old for this stuff. But what you saying? I mean, it's like I also occasionally motivate. I'm like, I should set one up
You
and
should.
just talk about this life. Who knows? Maybe people care.
You,
But then again,
yeah.
you know,
But like even just
I
having fun with it, even if you like, I see a lot of casts doing different fun ones. A big one is, especially in musical casts for like high schoolers or middle schoolers, they'll have like 7 people sing whatever like the main song line is for like one of the lead parts, and they'll be like, guess which person is Regina George, or guess which person is like Mary Poppins, and they'll all sing it, and then like in the comments everyone's like, the first girl did it best, and then they always will throw in like some random dude who like his voice is cracking and it's the most hilarious part. But it's stuff like that, or there's stuff that goes viral of people kind of giving their like, we've got this like team speech to the cast before they go on for a show. So there's some kind of cool, fun things. And I think each community in theater has their own traditions that are really special and cool to see. And it's cool to celebrate other people who are doing things that make them happy and sharing. There's something about knowing that like you get off that stage and like the people in that audience for the past 2-3 hours, whatever it is, like they forgot about what's stressing them out at home, or their kid crying over something, or whatever is going on in their life, and like they just were like taken out of their current existence into this world that you get to put them in. I've always just admired that, and every time I go see any sort of show or see any performance, there's like a second where I'm like crying, and I'm like, this is such a special experience, and I don't know if everyone really connects and understands that, or if it's just like people who've been performers before that really understand how impactful that is.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And I think we need it. We as a people, it's not just performers. We need communion. We need community. You know, we live in vast cities now, places. I mean, and I love big cities, but we live in places where there's more people than sort of evolutionarily we were ever supposed to coexist with, right?
Yeah.
And we don't know our neighbors, and most of us don't go to church on Sundays. And now I don't, because I don't believe in this stuff, but the act of going as a community to gather in a place together every Sunday is a beautiful thing, or every Saturday, or every Friday
Yeah.
is a beautiful thing. we have lost our places of communion. And the pandemic only emphasized that. And we live in social media echo chambers, and we have Netflix, and we have all our streaming services, and it's easy not to get off the couch, but it deprives us of something. It drains us of something. And we need, clearly, as a people, to commune with each other, to be present with each other. And so I think that's the experience you're speaking to, and
Yeah.
it's the experience that I think all performance artists, to some degree or another, have devoted their lives to being a part of that act of communion. Um, and it's clear that we need it.
Yeah.
But anyway, I agree with you.
Yeah. Is there anything that you think that like people should know about Shakespeare or acting or being a creative professionally?
Oh, that's a big question. As far as Shakespeare, I would, for anybody that has a wall about it, I would just urge them to break through it with live performance, and go see good live performance. Go see professionals, and once you break through whatever barrier education or junior high left you with, you'll discover something pretty stunning. He is the greatest playwright of the English language. He's probably the greatest writer of at least Western history that I have ever encountered. And we're in a world now where there's some pushback against that idea. Not just Shakespeare, but many people. But he was everything he's cracked up to be, and what he has to offer us is magnificent. As far as being a creative, it's as brutally hard for many people as you think it is, and you got to work hard. And uh, I guess I would just urge people to have empathy, and to give more money, and to tip better.
Go support your local theater or local arts in
Yeah.
any way that you can.
Yeah, yeah.
Go see a Shakespearean show sometime soon.
Take care of your server.
Yeah. That's huge.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of funny to think back to, there probably were times where people were going to see live theater every week, every few weeks, way more frequently. And it's such a cool concept. I wish that our world revolves around that now.
I think here in our town, we're an island in how we think about education and lifestyle. And I mean, you live in a community where it's really appreciated, I'm sure. And
I do. I mean, I live in California.
yeah, I'm sure we're the only county in this whole area that funds the public schools with special funding for the arts. And pay additional taxes to maintain that in our schools. But we're an island.
I believe it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe it.
Yeah.
And I love California, but it's not that arts funding here is incredible. It's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's not.
I was going to say, I remember growing up in Chicago, I feel like there was a period at one point where there was a lot of talk around cutting funding for the arts, and you started to see it. I mean, it's not like, you're right, it's not like there was mass amounts of funding to begin with, but it's just so hard because the little funding that there is, like every dollar of that gets used in the arts, and art is so impactful on the youth, and they're I mean, it's studies show they're better at all the other things in school when they're in the arts and involved in being creative in other ways. So it's really
There's no
huge.
denying that it is a deeply important part of our development to be engaged with art, with music, with performance. The people that don't care about it and want to cut it are generally bitter, angry people who never got it in the first place. and have grown a certain element of bias and bigotry towards it.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm not saying that wonderful people can't decide to give their money elsewhere. They absolutely can. Everybody can and should choose their place of philanthropy. I am frustrated by those that want to cut the funding, especially of arts education and especially of arts institutions, because they just don't care about that element of the civil discourse.
Yeah, they don't think it directly impacts them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
this idea of why should I pay for that? It's like, well, we pay for a lot of,
Yeah.
we pay for your roads,
There's
we
a
pay
lot-
for your
A lot of things that you don't necessarily know. But
yeah.
Have you decided on next season's performances?
Yes. Yeah, next season we're doing Shakespeare's As You Like It and Shakespeare's Hamlet.
okay.
We're doing that in repertory with The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde. And then our fall play, which is this added play I was talking about, is going to be The Glass Menagerie by Tennessee Williams. So
Ooh.
all four masterpieces. Maybe a little conservative in terms of their status, but they're all masterpieces, and with them we're trying to expand our season. So we're rolling the dice a bit on expanding our footprint. So that's sort of the larger risk of the season. The shows themselves are all sort of guaranteed masterpieces. So
Yeah.
I look very forward to offering them to our community.
Yeah.
And both Glass Menagerie and Ernest have never been performed in the 43-year history of this festival. Neither playwright has been produced in the 43-year history of this festival, which is sort of mind-blowing. So I'm very excited to
That's
offer them.
huge.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to coming and seeing you.
Yeah.
No, I hope you can.
I'll do my best. I'd love to. I'd love to.
I am sad to say that our time together today is time to wrap up. So
Great.
For those of you watching, thank you for watching me and my grandpa or listening on all the audio platforms. We'll be excited to have you guys back next Wednesday for the next episode. And more than anything, definitely go support your local arts programs, go see something, or go ahead and pick up that guitar in your closet or find something to bring the creativity back in your life. I think that'd be really cool. But thank you, Charles Pasternak, for joining us today.
It's my absolute pleasure. Thank you, Tilly. Thank you, Uncle Michael.
I love you, Charlie.
It's a joy. It's a joy. And congratulations on this podcast. It's an amazing thing.
Thanks.
Good for you, Tilly. Way to make it happen.
I'm trying.
Keep making it happen. And thank you for having me.
Of course. And then we close by waving goodbye to everyone.
All right. Off we go.